and welcome to The Relax, your yoga teacher podcast, the podcast that tries to take the stress out of being a yoga teacher. Because let's face it, nobody got into teaching yoga to be burnt out, stressed, overworked or tired. We got into yoga teaching so that we could spread the joy, the life-changing benefits of yoga that we ourselves probably experienced, and now we want to spread that into the world. So how can we do that in a way that doesn't burn us out, that doesn't make us tired, that enhances our lives? Because it is possible, I promise. So too many times I have seen yoga teachers just crash and burn because they are putting too much pressure on themselves, or they are working in inefficient ways that means that their yoga teaching doesn't enhance their lives. So in this podcast, what we're going to do is we're going to just have a little look at some of the pitfalls, some of the common blocks that I see again and again in my yoga teacher training, and also just in my many years in the yoga industry. So welcome. Today, we're going to look at the most Googled question when it comes to yoga teaching. And I think this is a really interesting question for many reasons. But when you are alone with your laptops and you can ask Dr. Google anything at all, the most common, most Googled question around yoga teaching is, how can I be a successful yoga teacher? I think this is a really juicy question for a number of reasons. And one thing is that when you're asking Google how to be a successful yoga teacher, you are not defining the terms of what success is. You're giving over your idea of success to other people on the internet, which is not going to work. So my answer to how to be a successful yoga teacher, you might find this is a bit of a cop-out, but it's not. It's not a cop-out. It needs to be answered in this way. We will look into, different career paths. We'll look into how to market your classes. We'll look into all of these in other episodes. But in this episode, I think we're going to really get the most important question. And that is, what does success look like for you? So when you're asking Dr. Google how to be a successful yoga teacher, what do you have in mind? One of the lovely things about teaching yoga is that there are infinite ways of doing it. It's not like working in a shop or being a doctor where, there's a defined career path. When you're a yoga teacher, you could teach in schools, you could teach online, you could have a studio, you could teach private. Like, there are so many different ways of doing it, and that's lovely, but it also is difficult because it's like when the options are infinite, it's quite difficult to narrow it down and decide which would be the best for you. Because how would you know? It's not like we have yoga teaching, like career advisors in schools. Like, yoga teaching's a pretty new careers. It's very difficult to imagine what you can do if you haven't got examples to follow. And also, I think we tend to follow the people that we can see the most of. So the most visible people are the people that we emulate, but they're not necessarily the people whose lives are being enhanced by their yoga teaching. So this is what I always say to my trainee teachers, is I say a successful yoga teacher is a yoga teacher whose yoga teaching is enhancing their lives. So if you are burnt out, if you miserable, if you hate yoga because you're so stressed from it, that doesn't mean that, it's broken and we can't fix it. But that wouldn't be my idea of, like, I wouldn't be like, yeah, I've made it. Even if I had 1 million Instagram followers, even if I had 100 classes a week and I was very visible, if I was burnt out and miserable, then I wouldn't think of that as success. And I think people often assume that to be a successful yoga teacher, you have to teach yoga full time, you have to have loads of followers on social media, you have to, teach at prominent studios. It's all this very outward idea of success. And I would say to you, if you're wanting to be a successful yoga teacher, really define what do you need in your life, what is important to you in your life, and go for that. Because what is very easy to happen when you're creating a career for yourself is that you chase something because it was just the visible option, and then when you get it, you're like, oh, that isn't what I want. So an example of this from my life was setting up very rigid classes, because then I realized that I couldn't do things like go on holiday. I couldn't have any flexibility in it. So I had to rearrange how I do it. The way that I rearranged it was that I managed to get people in that I trusted that could cover my classes. But if you make this if you love traveling, don't chase to have a yoga studio, because then your yoga studio is going to stop you from being able to travel. And this sounds so obvious. It is obvious when you're on the other side of it, but it's really difficult to do for yourself. So it's very easy to look at other people and go, well, it makes no sense why they've got a building with loads of rent if what they really want to do is travel the world. They should have set up their business slightly different. It's really easy to do that on the other side. It's really difficult to do it for yourself. And I think one of the reasons why it's so difficult to do it for yourself is because we're just not very good at being honest about what our desires are, for a number of reasons. One, because we might think that wishes and our desires are somehow unethical or immoral. Maybe we don't do this on a conscious level, but I know for me, one of the values that I was given in my life from my culture was that work needs to be hard. So there was always this message that hard work was virtuous, and that all things that are worth having need to be hard. So I would subconsciously self-sabotage myself when life was easy. So when I was doing classes that I really enjoyed at times that suit me, and I was making money from it, that felt so wrong. It felt like I was doing something illegal. Like, that's not how life should be. Life shouldn't be easy. Life needs to be hard. So what I would do is I would subconsciously self-sabotage by putting a random class on at 6 a.m. that I didn't enjoy. And then I would feel relief because I was working hard. And this idea that being productive needs to be hard is really pervasive. It's really insidious, and you have to decondition yourself from it. And the other thing is that saying that you want financial security, that sounds especially as a yoga teacher. So we're supposed to just do this for the love of it. We're supposed to just be yoga teachers because we love teaching yoga. And so it seems almost unethical to say, and also I want to be able to pay my bills. But it's going to be completely unsustainable for you to be a yoga teacher if you're not able to support your life. Nobody wants to live in poverty. You are going to burn out if you don't create, and if you are not honest about how much money you want. And it's really, talking about money is awful. It makes me it makes me want to put everything back in my mouth when I talk about money. But you're just going to have to do it, because and you don't have to talk it with other people, but you have to be honest with yourself about what you need. So I was really lucky when I set up as a yoga teacher, because I set up as a yoga teacher straight from university. So when I set up as a yoga teacher, I'd also my family were never, ever, ever wealthy, like ever. I've never been used to having money. And when I set up as a yoga teacher, I set up straight after university. I lived in a shared house. My outgoings were minimum, and I was able to cover my costs that were very, very low as a yoga teacher quite quickly, which meant that I could be a full-time yoga teacher quite early on. Now, your circumstances might be different. Also, I don't have children. So, not having children means that I have the freedom financially, and I'm not having to provide for somebody else. So if you do have children, or if you're at a different part of your life, maybe you've got a corporate career, or maybe you are about to retire, like if you already have those outgoings that are bigger, if you already have a life that is set up, then it's going to be a bit more difficult for you to like take that leap into full-time yoga teaching, because your expenses are so much higher. And that isn't a bad thing. You just need to be honest about it. So at the beginning, everyone's like, oh no, I don't like money's not an I don't mind not having any money, until it actually happens, and then you're like, oh, this isn't very nice. I don't like this, and you're gonna burn out unless you're honest about that. I think that some of the most successful yoga teachers that I know, some of the people who I'm like, oh my goodness, your life looks and sounds absolutely lovely, are the ones that have other jobs on top of their yoga teaching. So there seems to be this drive that in order to be a successful yoga teacher, you need to only teach yoga. And I think that is complete rubbish. It's total rubbish. Like, there's no such thing as just being a yoga teacher anyway. Even if you are a full-time yoga teacher and you don't have another job, you're going to have to do things that are not yoga teaching in order to be able to be a yoga teacher. So for example, you might need to be a marketer, because you might have to like learn how to do websites. You might have to learn, like, you are going to have to put on other caps in your yoga teaching business. And I actually love that about yoga teaching. I think it's a really creative career. I love the fact that the stuff that I have learned as a yoga teacher, like I can now code websites, I can, use all this technology. My communication skills is so much better. Like, I've learned so much, and I love that. But if you think that anybody has their entire career just from getting up, teaching a class and sitting down, then that just doesn't happen. So there's absolutely no reason why one of those caps can't be another paid role. So some of the most, like I said, some of the most successful people that I know who are yoga teachers are the people who have part-time jobs or even full-time jobs, and then teach around that. And what that does as well is it allows you to keep it fresh, because let's face it, when you change the terms of your relationship with yoga to, this isn't just something I do for fun, but this is something that's going to pay my mortgage, this is the thing that's going to make sure that I have childcare for my children, this is what's going to like put food on the table and clothes on the backs, your relationship with it is going to change a lot. So there is nothing wrong with saying, actually, I want to spread the love of yoga, but I don't necessarily want to change the terms of the relationship so much that it becomes a stress in my life. You don't want the thing that you love to become the stress. So it's absolutely fine to have another job alongside it. The other thing is that looking at your own values. So this is something that I come back to again and again and again. The things that are important to me, there's three pillars of my life, what's important to me, and yours are going to be different. So it's not about these pillars, these are just the ones that support me. Your ones will be different. It's about finding what those pillars are. And the three pillars for my life are connection, security, and freedom. And at different points, those become more important or less important. So at some points in my life, freedom is more important. At some point in my life, security is more important. And sometimes connection is more important. But I need all three in order to feel happy, in order to feel fulfilled in my job and in my life. And so I need to, when I'm creating my career around it, I need to keep those things in mind. And it's really difficult to know what your values are because you might never have considered it before. So one of the things that I do with my trainees, my trainee teachers, and I do in my own life is every day I set an intention for the day. So every day I come back to myself just before and it doesn't take long, it literally takes 10 seconds. I ask myself, what is important to me today? And it might be that I want to take one thing at a time. It might be that I want to connect with the people in my yoga classes. It might be that I want to be in nature. And it doesn't really matter what it is, and it doesn't need to take long to do. But over time, so I write these down, and then over time what you'll find is your intentions start to become samey. So you start seeing the same ones again and again and again. And what's really interesting is if you do this with lots of people, everybody's is going to be different. So for you're feeling like, oh my goodness, my intentions are the same all the time. But if you were to put your intentions next to someone else's, you would see that they're different intentions coming up. And over time, you start to see your values. So your values start coming out, and then they might be different to the ones that you thought that were important to you. And you can use those to inform more long-term goals. So if again and again and again, you're seeing, I want to hang out with my family, I want to see my family, I want to see my friends and family, like that shows you that you need to build a life around that, so you can look your opportunities in your career and when you're building it to make sure that you're not inadvertently spiraling out the other way. So, if financial security is really important to you, maybe you don't set up completely on your own. Maybe you work within a studio. Maybe you have that second job. Maybe instead of doing donation classes, you do private classes. Being honest about what you need in order to have a fulfilling life is what's going to be sustainable. So that's the thing that's going to make sure that you don't burn out, because you're going to burn out when you're working in a way that isn't making your life better. And nobody wants that. Like, yoga teaching is a privilege. It's such a privilege. We get to have such a lovely life. And what I find when I work with people, when I work with yoga teachers, is it's just normally a few tweaks, like a few tweaks here and there that allows them to have the life that they want. So that's what I mean when we're talking about being a successful yoga teacher. So really define your terms of what success means for you. Don't try and emulate someone else's, because you're going to end up building a life that is for someone else and not for you. So I hope this was helpful. If you've got any questions, please do get in touch. I'd love to hear from you. So please do get in touch, and I will see you for the next episode where we're going to be talking about the different career paths on options. We're talking a lot today about how there's lots of different options, and we're going to explore that in a bit more detail in the next episode. Bye.